Hi, welcome to Street Priest Ministries. I'm your host, Brother Jay, as we're taking the Gospels back to the streets. Today's drive-through message is waiting on a promise of God. I told you before, if God lay on my spirit to switch reels, that's what I'm going to do. And He laid on my spirit for this message here. And we're in the middle of the series on the Apocrypha. Make sure you get this book, King James 1611 Apocrypha, either one. And we'll resume teaching. Like I said, we'll have times where I follow what the Spirit of God leads me to do, and He led me to teach on this until put a momentary pause on the book of Ezra. We're teaching from the Apocrypha, the book of Ezra right now. But today's message, waiting on a promise of God, I felt God put this on my spirit. Oh, by the way, these are the best of times. These are the worst of times. These are biblical times. And as time rolls on, these words I say become pregnant with more meaning as you see the calamities that God is causing around the world. Finally, man is starting to realize there is a God on his throne, and he's active right now. Volcanoes popping off, including Yellowstone, just popped off recently. Around the world, earthquakes, giant sinkholes opening up and swallowing cars and people. These are biblical times. It's hailing and snowing in the middle of summertime, in the middle of the deserts, and over in Saudi Arabia. Around the world is underwater, practically right now, including Europe and parts of Africa and the Middle East. Mecca's underwater. And all I can say, there's only one and true God, and that's the God of this Bible that we're studying here, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Israel. The God of America. It's a coveted nation too. I give my teaching on the United States and the Bible. It's a God coveted nation just like Israel. And we have a dispensation too to get the gospel out to the world. And this is what God is setting up, his end time harvest. And this is what he's using, they're going to use the United States for. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sins reproach any people. So God is cleansing this nation and cleaning out corruption. The satanic cabals that slaughter the innocents have taken over. That's already slaughtering the innocent. God's purging this nation of these evil people, of these the Jesuit, Illuminati, Mason, occult, satanic cabals that has hijacked this nation. We don't even have holidays, we have Heli days, Roman Heli days. Jezebel whore church over in Rome, and a pedophile has been running this nation for the past 2 centuries, since the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. 1871, we've been under tyranny and slavery of this Babylonian system. And God is cleaning house. He's freeing this nation up to get the good news out in these last days, this end time harvest. This is what's going on around the world. Now, we live in a nation, fast-paced society, hurry up. Fast food, everything's fast. That's why you heard me at the beginning of the program, drive-through message for the day. These messages are normally 30 minutes to 45 minutes in length that we teach here at Street Priest, because most people got the attention span of a goldfish now. Everything's fast paced, hurry up. And God is slow. I've been dealing with God for decades now. And the problem I've had, the problem I have with God, the big G, doesn't have a clock up there. And that's a big problem with a guy like me. He's always on time, but he's always late. So you figure that out. But his ways are not our ways. His heaven is higher than the earth, so are his ways higher than our ways, and his thoughts are not thoughts. And when God does something in the scripture, or gives a promise, and we're going to get some examples. I'm going to give you some examples in the Old Testament. So you might as well, this is going to be at least a 5-part video series, 4 or 5. And we're going to take our time through this because God laid on my spirit to do so. Because we're in the end times, the last days, and we're in a jet-paced society. We're no longer in an agrarian society of farmers where you sit and you watch your food grow, rotating crops before you can eat it, before you can harvest it. You had to wait for it to grow. You had to store it. You had to be patient. Same with livestock, animals. One thing I hated growing up, I was a city slicker, raised in the hood. But we would occasionally, every other summer or so, had to go visit my uncles on their farms. And one thing I learned to hate was the crow of a rooster. Because that was the farm's alarm clock. That was the farm's alarm clock to tell you to get up, time to go to work. And you would work from sun up to sundown on that farm. It was always plenty of things to do, but one thing, the pace was a lot slower. And what you saw that was on the farm, what was on the dinner table. You just didn't go to the store and buy your food. You had to go out and kill it. And you had to quarter it, prep it, quarter it, before you could eat it. And you had to go pick the food. And it was, everything was slower. Everything you was eating out the ground. Or had to go kill it. So it slowed you down. So I can understand an agrarian society, agriculture society that the Bible is written in. In those times, things were slow. And these people were still somewhat impatient, even in this society. So you can imagine now. Where you can go to the grocery store, you don't have to kill anything. The vegetables, the fruit, you don't have to pick any fruit off the tree. We had to do all that. We had fruit trees, vineyards, cut the grapes and put them on wax paper, and it became raisins over time. You just go buy a box of raisins now in the store. But everything was a lot slower. So I learned a lot on my uncle's farm, on my uncle's farms. Being a city slicker, how to slow things down on a farm, how things are slower, and to have some patience. Between that, hunting and fishing, you learn patience. You gotta have patience for all those things. And I did all those growing up. All those things growing up. I was raised with men's men. And we had to go through you had to go through rites of manhood, the rites of passage to manhood. Had to go kill your dinner. So you learned a lot growing up, the slow pace. Like I said, hunting and fishing teaches you patience too. Now, back to this society. This society is a hurry-up society. This society is pretty much a godless, this generation X, Z, Y, I don't know what it's called now. But this society here is a mess. Raised Marxist, socialists. A lot of them don't have a raised Hollywood style. Hollywood and raised a lot of these kids. We raised on MK Ultra mind control box TVs, their television programs. So when they get a rude introduction to God, when God calls some of these youth, it's really a perpetual shock to them. They can't get used to how slow God moves, because it's a hurry up society. Everything is fast paced. Everything's hurry up and wait. And when you're dealing with God, God takes his time, because God is outside our dimension. We're in the third, some say fourth dimension. It's a lot slower. God is far beyond our dimension. So when he makes moves, he's making moves in the spiritual realm, the spiritual dimension. They have a lasting, long-term effect, generation. When God usually makes his move, you wouldn't want to play God in chess. You would be hundreds of moves ahead of you. And this is the God we serve. Now, you had some people, and we're going to read some of them in the Bible, that tried to rush God's promise. He was just taking too long. We'll read about a couple of them. And these are famous people who are picked in the Old Testament. The New Testament is ordinary people. In the Old Testament, we're going to start with Abraham. Now, Abraham was 75 years old when God told him to leave his family, separate from his family, which he didn't do. He took Lot, his nephew Lot, with him. That was a thorn in his flesh. But God told him to leave his family, 75, leave the land of the Kurds, leave Nimrod's turf. He was king. Separate from his family and go out toward Canaan, to the land of Canaan, and just walk around. And he told him, every square inch that your foot touches will be left to you and your descendants. That's why Abraham's called the father of faith. So that whole geographical area that's over in Israel is what Abraham walked. And it's about the size, roughly, of California, Israel, with almost the same kind of climate. That's how far he walked. And he said, this will be left to you and your descendants forever. Now, the problem was Abraham was childless, him and Sarah. They had no children. He's 75, and she's 65. When they left the land of Ur, of the Chaldees, both childless. Now, from 75 to just 12 years go by, God still hadn't come through on his promise. So Abraham and Sarah, they decide to have a tent meeting with her slave girl Hagar and help Abraham produce God's promised seed called Ishmael. And Ishmael is the prince, the father of the Arabians, the Arabs. And when they tell you their father's Abraham too, they're not lying. It is true. Ishmael is father of the Arabs. Born from the Hagar, the Egyptian slave girl. They were children of bondage. And the Arabs, the Arabians, have been in the slave business since the dawn of the Bible, the early days of the Bible. They sold Joseph into slavery. They've been in the slave business a long time. The children of bondage. Now, Abraham doubted God, thought he helped God's plan along. God was moving too slow. And we're going to read this. So let's get to it, because we got some reading to do anyway. I told you it's going to be 4 or 5. So let's start with Abram. So we're going to go to Genesis 17:15. And see about the father of faith, impatient with God. He want to rush God's plan. And you'll find some people that were impetuous in here that wanted to rush God, was just taking too long. So they thought they could do it, speed up his will in the flesh, because he already spoken. Well, we'll just help him along. But God is a God of set times. And this scripture is full of many examples of God having his clock, his set time, not ours. Well, I could tell you the stories of trying to get street priests off the ground, and it wasn't God's time. If I knew God, I had some people prophesy some things over Brother Jay, but I tried to rush it. God was taking too long. And it crashed and burned miserably. But God picked a time that I would have never ever picked. I pretty much got frustrated and was moving on. I didn't want to be a preacher anyway. The last thing I wanted to be on earth. So I said, okay, you win, maybe I'm wrong. And that's when God miraculously opened the door to get this social media ministry, because I sure didn't want a brick and mortar ministry. So I sure didn't want that. But he opened the door to get the social media ministry off the ground called Street Priest Ministry. And it was a rocky start. But that was God. He opened the door. It was his set time. He had prepped me on the backside of the mountain for years. For this generation and this hour here. God's time. That's what this title is. Waiting on the promise of God. Now Abraham, imagine Abraham's already 75 when he left. He's already an old man, him and his wife. And now, Abraham, the clock is really ticking, so he's like at 87, decide, well, let me have God's plan out and have this kid, Ishmael. But let's read, we're going to read how God felt about it. Let him read for yourself. Now, he doesn't even pay any attention to it. Because his word is forever settled in heaven. Okay, so that's Genesis 17:15. And God said to Abraham, as for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be, which means mother of multitudes. And I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed. He laughed, thought it was funny. And said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? Now he had already had Ishmael. And Ishmael was a young lad now. Ishmael is about 13 years old. And Abraham said unto God, oh, that Ishmael might be before thee. his product, what he produced in that tent in the flesh, what he thought he could do in the natural, in the flesh, to help God's program along. But God wasn't even considering his tent meeting with a slave girl and making Ishmael the promised seed. The promised seed had to be a miracle from God that only he could do. Not to be done in the natural, but in the supernatural. That's when you learn about the ways of God. When God opens a door, it's supernaturally done. You could only say it's a miracle of God. His stamp is on it. You could not do it. I could not do it. Like I said, God opened up the door for Street Priest. I was exhausted all my human efforts to try to get this ministry up and going. This ministry, it's a miracle ministry, believe me. Trust me when I tell you, it's a miracle. And it's been a miracle ever since. Especially out there in cyberspace, behind enemy lines, if you know what I mean, catching the drift. But anyway, God did this. To God be the glory, the Most High. I sure don't take credit for this one. And Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before me, product of the flesh, with his tent meat." And God said, "Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac." His name means laughter. God had the last laugh with Abraham. Since y'all want to laugh, you and your wife, and she laughed too. Thought it was a joke. Here we are. Just what put flesh and blood on. And Sarah's 90, he's 100. How many 90 years olds are popping out babies? How many at that age could even, just keep it real, could have sex? I'm trying to be, I'm always got to think about the kids. I had something else I would love to say, more street, but I always keep in mind, this is a family program, Street Priest Man. I try to keep that way. That's why I bite my tongue so many times. I got so many times I bite my tongue. You just don't know things. I've only had a couple of videos where I told the parents to get the kids out the room, parental supervision advised, and I cut loose. And I talked in street language, you could say, adult language, not sanitized rated G language. But anyway, you catch my drift. They're a little bit too old to be popping out kids. And God said, "Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac," laughter. His name means laughter. "And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him." Remember I told you, God is thinking generation. God's setting up when he does something for generation after generation. That's why you have to be patient with. And that includes us, with our children, our family. Generation. God is seeing the big landscape. We're looking at the immediate now and the consequences of now and time. God is beyond time. It's above time. He has no clock. He deals in eternity from eternity. And when he does move in time, it's for eternal. He's just said everlasting, generation after generation. So he's making moves for eternal, everlasting times within our time. So be patient with God. When he moves in a big way. That's what I'm trying to get you to see, the big picture. "And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him. I have blessed him. And he shall be fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes, 12 emblems shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation, the Arab nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac. Do you hear that? And Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time. Remember I told you God's a God of set time. At this set time. Let that marinate on your brain. Into next year. Still had to wait another year. God. Now, I want that to seep in. This is God's ways. Learning God's ways here. This is what we learn. Now you go to Genesis 18:11. You see how Sarah feels about this. The wife. Genesis 18:11. Now Abraham and Sarah was old and well stricken in age. Remember these words. Old and well stricken in age. So we know we're talking old and well stricken age. We're talking 90 and 100 in biblical terms. And it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of woman. She wasn't having a period no more. Period dried up. She's in menopause for years. I would imagine years. Sarah was in menopause. Imagine this would, the average woman check out having eggs in their 50s. And she's 90 years old. No flesh and blood on it. How many of you 90-year-old women that's following street peace can imagine popping out a child right now? Or even having sex to pop out the child, right? Sorry. Oops. My bad. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure with my Lord also old? So me and this old man gonna have some sex? Are you serious? This old gold here. And the Lord said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh? God put her on blast. Where did Sarah laugh? Saying, shall of us surely I bear a child, which am old? Told you, miracle. God got to do this. God gets the credit. He gets the glory. This is a miracle baby. It's Isaac, believe it. This child named Laughter. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Hey, ask yourself that. You that's waiting on the Lord. This is for those that's waiting on the promise of God. Something they need God to come through, a miracle in their life. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed. God's a God of set times. At the time appointed. I want this to register with you. That's why we're doing repetition and association. I'm saying it over and over. To embed this in your skull. Drilling this into your hard cranium. At the time appointed, I will return to thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. So let that register. For this is for the impetuous and people that's impetuous out there. And I'm one of them. I admit, I raise my hand. How many are honest? Be honest. Honesty starts with yourself. Telling the truth starts with yourself. Even if you go into an AA meeting or some place like that, you have to stand up and admit what you are. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drunk. That's how you begin to get help. So you impetuous ones out there that want to rush God's plan, God's moving too slow for you. Be honest with yourself. Say, yes, this is me. This message is for you. It's called waiting on the promise of God. I'm one of them. He always moves slow for me. Too slow. But he's always on time, like I said. He shows up and shows out in his set appointed time. He shows up and shows out. And that's what I want you to get. Understanding God's ways. Now, we got Abraham here, and he went on and had, God kept his promise, and he had Isaac, and separated from Ishmael, sent him packing, him and his mom, Hagar. And they said the children of the free can't live with the children of bondage. And so they kicked the mother and the child out. I'll get my teaching on that. I taught on that. Children of bondage, children of free can't dwell together. And God, that analogy was used by Paul, talking about the children of Sinai versus the children of the New Testament, Christ, Jesus. The children of faith, the children of promise, which represents Christ. And Moses represented the children of the law, the children of bondage. The Old Testament. He said, kick the mother out of any children. The two can't live together. If you're dealing with a legalist, I suggest you go north and they go south. You go east, they go west. Christ set me free years ago from this bunch, but I had to go through the fire. I went through the fire, and it made me the man I am. I have zero tolerance for Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, and hypocrites. Was what persecuted Jesus, the religious bunch. It is that. They that worship my God, Father in heaven, must worship him in spirit and truth. Because God seeketh such, the just shall live by faith. By the promised seed. We're the promised seed. Not the seed of the flesh, of bondage. That was Abraham, and Hagar, and Ishmael, a product of.